This episode is produced and made possible with the help of Raycast Media.
Si le gustaría escuchar un episodio en español, por favor escuche el siguiente episodio.
Good morning, everyone, and very happy Monday. My name is David Fuentes, and I'm part of the team of La Incubadora podcast. I'm also a part of the team here at the Economic Growth Business Incubator, and I serve as a community and development coordinator. So a big part of my role is getting this information accessible to you all in our community. La Incubadora podcast is a part of the Economic Growth Business Incubator, a local nonprofit with the mission to provide training, coaching, and support to aspiring and existing business owners who face barriers to growing a successful business. La Incubadora podcast is born out of the need to put in video and audio a lot of the success stories that we see here at the Business Incubator. We also want to answer frequently asked questions and connect small business owners with the resources to succeed in your business on your own time and wherever you are while you have access to a mobile device. But before we begin, as always, EGBI wants to thank Raycast Media for their help and collaboration with developing this podcast. So thank you, Raycast Media, for your partnership. And so now on to today's episode. We're really excited to have today Michele Martell, the founder of Martell Media House, to discuss the essential topic of intellectual property. And so this is a topic that we've had questions on previously at EGBI, and we wanted to make sure we got the best and brightest to answer these important questions. Michele will explain what intellectual property is and why it's so vital for entrepreneurs and creators. We'll explore the various types of IP, such as copyrights, trademarks, trade secrets, patents, and learn what can and cannot be protected. Michele will also show the benefits of protection and the key steps in the registration process. And so this conversation is valuable to anyone looking to safeguard their creative assets. And so as I mentioned before, we have our special guest, Michele Martell. But let me tell you a little bit about Michele. Michele is the founder of Martell Media House, where she helps creators, entrepreneurs, artists, and visionaries launch, build, and protect their businesses with practical and forward-thinking legal guidance. Michele specializes in intellectual property, privacy law, and entertainment business affairs. She has several decades of experience working with major brands like the Muppets, with WWE, Sony, and Hasbro. Michele is also an accomplished event producer and brand strategist, known for her engaging workshops and seminars. She currently serves in various leadership roles, including the vice chair of the entertainment and sports law section of the Austin Bar Association and the co-chair of the Austin chapter of the International Association of Privacy Professionals. And so with that, I'd love for you all to help me in giving a warm welcome to Michele. And so, Michele, it's a complete pleasure to have this conversation with you.
Thank you, David, and thanks everybody for being here. I'm going to start off with a full-on lawyer disclaimer that I'm going to read to you. So basically, I need to tell you that the contents of this presentation are just intended to convey general information. You should not consider it legal advice. You should not rely on it. And this doesn't create an attorney-client relationship. And so it's actually a great place to start, because one of the fun things about working with lawyers is that you're sort of entering a realm that has a bunch of different rules. And often you're like, I don't understand all the rules. So that first rule is essentially, I'm providing useful information, but I'm not your lawyer. As we'll let you know toward the end of this, you can contact me via my website and ask for an initial consultation. But so let's jump in, David.
Yes. Thank you for taking the time to be here with us today. This has been a much requested topic. And so it's important that we have the experts in the community kind of convey this information. So thanks once again for making the time.
Sure.
Yes. And again, for all of our viewers on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube, thank you for being here. And let's get started. So Michele, I did read your biography, but I wanted to give you a chance in case I missed anything. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and ultimately what led you to create Martell Media House?
Sure. Yeah. So I sort of consider myself as a cousin to Texans because I grew up in northern New Mexico and then went to Los Angeles for college and law school and then worked there for a really long time. And about 10 years ago, after working for the WWE and Vince McMahon and very abruptly not having a job anymore from the WWE, I moved to Austin, Texas. And I moved here 10 years ago because the sky is correct. So growing up in northern New Mexico, where the sky is 3/4 of the universe, I came to Austin. I was like, this is the correct place for me to be. And the thing that I really love about my practice in Austin is that I work with people, where in Los Angeles, I work for companies. And here in Austin, I get to work for people who may have companies, but it's much more an individual enterprise. And I work really hard to sort of bring the power of the legal structure to people who often may feel like it's not really made for them, or that hiring a lawyer looks like a scary thing where you have to go to some downtown tall law firm and talk to some old guy in a suit with a cigar. And that's not what I am, and that's not what this is about. So really the thing that I have enjoyed the most about being in Austin is really Austin is a town of makers and creators. And the thing that has always brought me joy from working with the Muppets and up is getting to help people bring their vision to light, whether, it's home repair business or book authors or musicians or consultants, really kind of helping people understand sort of common legal structures and how to maneuver your way through it, which is why I love doing these presentations with you guys.
Yeah, no, and I thank you very much for bringing that, right? Because the people that we work with primarily are small business owners, right? Who have either never had to navigate or have had difficulty navigating these systems. And the legal aspect of it is so important for folks to understand. And so, yeah, thank you for kind of explaining that this is people oriented, and so
Yes.
the information has to be accessible. And so, thank you for the introduction and telling us a little bit about yourself. And now we get over to the meat of it, right? Which is intellectual property. And so, Michele, can you provide a basic explanation of what qualifies as intellectual property and why it's important for entrepreneurs and creators?
Sure. So I'm going to first give us kind of the clinical definition, and then we'll talk about what that means in practice. So kind of 5 major groups of intellectual property. The first is copyright, which protects original works of authorship fixed in a tangible means of expression. We'll come back to that. Trademark, which people think they understand, but is trickier, which serves to exclusively identify the source of a good or service. Trade secrets, information that is secret and proprietary to a specific business. Patents, which protects inventions or processes. And then they're really a form of intellectual property is a right of personality, which we now maybe would refer to as name, image, and likeness. We think about that with college athletes, but it's really the use of your name, image, and likeness. Somebody's using it in an unprotected way. So copyright, trade secret, trademark, patent, and right of personality are the main 5 groups. And so what exists, again, is kind of the difference between those rights exist, but you gain additional rights and more protection if you've registered them. So we'll talk when we get in there about how you register copyrights and trademarks and patents. But under US law, for example, you have a copyright in something the moment the idea comes out of your head and is fixed in a tangible means of expression. So you have that copyright, you get more rights if you register, for example. But broadly is this idea of kind of looking at the things that you're creating or that you have access to and using what I call like an intellectual property filter, where you're looking at it and thinking, is this intellectual property that I should be protecting? And one of the reasons that really under the US Constitution, we protect intellectual property is that the goal is to incentivize human innovation, right? We want people to get the benefit of their hard work and their creativity. Intellectual property is the way that you create generational wealth, right? You've made something, you've created a work of some kind, and it doesn't require you necessarily being the one who is doing the thing. The work can do it for you. And so the other thing I love about intellectual property, when they teach it in law school, they describe intellectual property as a bundle of sticks. I'm carrying a bundle of sticks.
Uh-huh.
And what that means is that I could give you one stick. This would mean, hey, I'm going to license you the right to use my trademark in plush teddy bears.
Mm-hmm.
But that the bundle of sticks is infinite because there's always new things happening, right? Oh, now all of a sudden you can use it for a cell phone ringtone. We didn't have that 25 years ago. Now you can use something in a virtual reality game. Now you can create something for somewhere else. And so it's really a never ending source of potential revenue. And so the idea really, and we'll explore that throughout this time, is be thinking about how what you're creating or how what you're doing could be considered intellectual property, and then therefore what steps should you take?
Yeah, no, thank you. And I think that provides the overall framework for what we're discussing in this interview, for us to get a useful understanding of the different types of intellectual property and when do you use them, when does it apply to us. And so I'd like to give you this moment also to elaborate a little bit more on I think we mentioned 5, right? Copyright, trademark, trade secrets, patents, and right of personality. Those are the ones that I caught.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
So a big part of our clients typically, sometimes, for example, they'll come up with a salsa recipe, and then they'll either ask me, "Oh, is there any way that I can, patent this?" Or, right, they're looking for kind of a way to protect themselves. So can you elaborate on when, for what product or service would you use a different type of intellectual protection?
Yeah. And so each thing kind of has its own specific. So just recognizing we're super general right now. We're at the top. So copyright really is protecting your right not to have other people copy your stuff, let's say, right? So if I wrote a book and someone's, copied the book and is selling it on Amazon and competing with me, if I have a registered copyright, I can go after them for infringement and I can get statutory damages and lawyers' fees. Those are the 2 main reasons you register your copyright. Is you have to have it in order to bring a lawsuit. You can show statutory damages, and then you get lawyers' fees from that. So that might be, for example, if you had created a workbook, if you had a curriculum, if you had kind of anything, if you had created a visual design that showed a matrix of how things get done. So it's an idea fixed in some tangible mean of expression. It might be your YouTube video. So copyright is kind of the stuff you're making, what we think of more generally as intellectual property, right? The writings, the visual work, the materials like that was copyright.
Okay.
So for something like a recipe, both copyright and trademark and patents, what they're trying to do, right, is to give creators sort of a protected period of time in which you are uniquely able to receive the benefits of that thing. But they also don't want to give people rights that would mean, hey, I'm going to stop somebody else from using it. So, for example, if you were a dress designer and you wanted to make a pattern for an A-line dress, you couldn't get a copyright in an A-line dress because that's a basic shape, and you can't be the one who says nobody else ever gets to make an A-line dress again, right? So one of the thoughts throughout all of these types of intellectual property is that you're looking at the degree to which it's sort of how things are done. This is how you make an A-line dress, and then the things unique that you've created. Right. Maybe I created an incredible embellishment to it that is not about the utility, but is some fantastic thing. And I can correct that. So, for example, I can read you a list of things that copyright does not protect. Right.
Yes, that'd be useful.
It's not going to cover these because the idea is these are sort of generic. You should be able to just use them freely. So it doesn't cover things like symbols, measuring charts, calendars, slogans, systems, letters or color variations, commonly known information, or fashion, right? So it doesn't want to give people rights to things that are utility, because then I could go after everybody and say, hey, you can never make another A-line dress again. I actually think there was the guy who claimed he was the inventor of hot yoga. And he wanted to copyright yoga practices like downward facing dog followed by up, and they were like, no, you can't own that because it's thousands of years old and you don't get to take it for yourself, right? So In each of these instances, you're looking at, is this just a utility of I added something new to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but if you can't protect that thing, let's say you couldn't protect the recipe because, they're like, it's tomatoes and hot sauce and lemon and onions and everybody does the same thing. You're thinking about how you're using other forms of intellectual property to protect that. You're looking for a good trademark, right? So let's talk about trademark for a minute. In that same kind of assessment of utilities, not very protectable versus fanciful, there is a beautiful, like if you think about the United Way, thermometer, right, where they're sort of showing you your way up there. So at one end of the non-protectable is something that is a utility, just generic, it's descriptive. I was driving somewhere recently and I saw a business and it was called Dan's Dirt. Great name, would be really hard to trademark, right? Because it's really descriptive. Dan's Dirt.
Yeah.
Okay. The most protectable at the other end are what is known as fanciful or arbitrary. And two great examples of that. For example, Muppets is a made-up word. Jim Henson made up that word. The company has 1 million trademark registrations for Muppets, and it's a made-up word, so perfectly ownable. Arbitrary is something like using the word Apple for a computer. If you wanted to use the word Apple and trademark it for being an Apple producer, you would not be able to get that trademark. But you're going to say something weird. And you're like, I'm going to call my phones and my computers Apple. Fanciful, arbitrary, weird, great, go for it. So oftentimes people will think about, they want their trademark to be descriptive. I want to tell you, my name is Dan and I sell dirt. That should be my trademark. I
see.
But you're looking for something that is ownable, right? So I might say to Dan, come up with a name, you have to clear it, you have to search for it, but maybe it's like Magical Mushroom Elixir, Dirt by Dan. Oh, now you've given me something maybe that you can own. You put weird words together and you can tell me what it's about. And the same thing broadly with patent stuff, right? You have to be able to show you have a new process, a new invention, a new way of doing something. And it can't just be a utility. And so there's lots of nuance and sophistication there. But at a very broad level, for all these kinds of, intellectual property, you're really looking at what is the new kind of additive thing that I've brought to this because I can own that versus the thing that is the utility, that is the description, that is generic.
Yeah. Yeah. No, perfect. And that makes sense. And I think you brought in a good point, right, of a name. Right. So being descriptive is something necessary that can't be trademarked. And so when our business owners are thinking of, naming their business, keeping that in mind, right?
Yes. And also thinking too, that maybe the name of your business is not your trademark, right? Because I could just be MMH LLC. Like that's a terrible trademark, but it's my corporate name and I don't need it to be doing a bunch of work for me, but I could have a product. Again, Michelle's Magic Mushroom Elixir, and I'm trademarking my product, right? So you can think about your business name does not need to be a trademark. You do, when you register for business in the state of Texas, you do have to clear your business name, right? Because the state doesn't want multiple businesses with similar names because it's confusing to consumers. So you do have to clear your business name. And then on the trademark side, the idea of trademark is an indication of source. And a great example is like we're familiar with the Coca-Cola wavy bottle, right? And so that means I could be anywhere in the world. I see that wavy bottle and then I think, oh, I know who makes that. That's Coca-Cola. I trust Coca-Cola. I want to drink their brown sugar water. So I'm going to buy this, right? And if somebody's infringed that trademark, they've put their brown sugar water in this Coke. Now all of a sudden they're getting the benefit of Coca-Cola's brand and its reputation and everything it's worked on for 100 years. And then that's the trademark infringement, right? So it really is this indication of source because you want there to be like, I think good things about those people. That tells me I can trust them. I feel good about that. So trademark is more about being able to tell who the goods or services are coming from. And that's what the work is doing as opposed to copyright, which is protecting the thing itself.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. Well, thank you for elaborating on that a little bit. Michele, what are some of the benefits of registering and having intellectual property protection?
Well, especially in the internet world, right, where anything you put on the internet, you feel like can be copied, right,
Mm-hmm.
is copyright registration, going and taking, some piece of intellectual property that you feel like is important and registering it in the Copyright Office gives you the protections we talked about. It is a requirement if you're going to bring a lawsuit. You get statutory damages and you get lawyers' fees. So the point of statutory damages is if I had put up a really great video and you stole it and you were using it instead of me, if I have to prove actual damages, I have to show that because you infringed my copyright, I lost this deal with Walmart and messy, hard, versus I have a registered copyright, statutory damages. Hey, you're infringing, pay me $30,000, please. Oh, and by the way, pay my lawyer. Right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
really powerful. And the other thing that I think is really important is copyright and trademark are pretty accessible to non-lawyers. Patent law, unless you're like an engineer or something, like I don't do patent law. I know enough to be like, you should go to a specific patent lawyer for that. But that's tricky. Copyright and trademark, especially copyright, you can file a copyright yourself. It costs $45 to file. Right. And so instead of going to a lawyer and paying lots of money, you can just kind of work through the system. They have tons of videos and FAQs. They know that non-lawyers are filing. So the Copyright Office is really a great place to kind of practice that. And then people will ask, well, how do I know what to register? And my non-scientific, non-legal answer is register the things that would make you feel bad if someone had stolen it. Right? So maybe you're a photographer and you're taking thousands of photographs every day. You're going to register every photograph? Probably not. But this one is beautiful and amazing. And the light was perfect. And it was of the eclipse with the tower and oh my God. Right? Go register that one. Right? Like you can sort of cherry pick. Separately, and this is a little in the weeds, is you can file a group. So if you have 10 photographs and they haven't yet been made available to the world, you can file all 10 of those in one filing. So that makes it easier. But that Copyright Office discipline, particularly if you're creating materials, maybe you create a how-to video once a week. Maybe every quarter you sit back and you're like, that one gets all the traffic. That's a great one. I'm going to go register copyright in that one. Right. So you're just kind of doing what I think of as copyright hygiene and just, deciding if, it merits you taking the time to go register a copyright.
Yeah, good. And so the most important thing I think I heard from that is register the things you would feel bad if someone stole it.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. That's very important, right? This is a question that we get over and over. So I feel great that we're getting these answers. And so one of the hardest and scariest part for our entrepreneurs, right, is everything legal seems like it has a process and a complicated process. And oftentimes there are a lot of dollar signs attached to it. So can you walk us through the registration process and what the key steps are and what our entrepreneurs should expect?
Yeah, so we've talked broadly about the copyright, so that you just go to the Copyright Office, and I think we're going to send out some materials afterwards, but you can just Google U.S. Copyright Office. And that's pretty straightforward. You're essentially filing, a digital version of the thing, the book, the article, the photograph, the video, the piece of music, kind of whatever it is. And there's different categories. So you're looking at which one, which is why I kind of advise people to just do one, kind of watch some videos, push yourself through. It's not the world's sexiest computer interface because it is the Copyright Office, but it's totally workable. And again, what I love is it's $45. Like if you came to a lawyer and you're spending hundreds of dollars, now it starts to get scary. If it's just you on a Saturday afternoon, just give it a whack, right? Plus, if they have questions about it, you will get an email back from somebody at the Copyright Office asking you if you really meant XYZ, and you can get advice from them. And so it's actually very friendly. So that's copyright. Patent, I'm going to say, is tricky. I don't advise people to do it on their own unless they have some kind of background. I actually do recommend you talk to a patent lawyer, because then that's a whole process of going in and showing prior work. One main thing to think about in patent law is there is a ticking clock. So from the moment you sort of bring your patented process into the world and start showing it to people, commercializing it, you have 12 months. So that's the main thing to know, is if you've got some cool thing you've invented, you have a ticking clock. Copyright and trademark, you care about that date, but if it took you 10 years to file it and nobody filed before you, doesn't matter, right? Patent, there's a ticking clock. So I'm not going to get deep in the weeds of patents because you should go to a patent lawyer. The trademark registration is kind of, let's say, in the middle of complexity. Here's copyright, here's trademark, here's patent. Because trademark is an indicator of source, but it's specific to a class of goods or services. And an example is the word Delta. You can have Delta Dental, Delta Faucets, Delta Airlines, and they're all using Delta as a trademark, but we as the consumers are not confused, right? We don't get on a Delta airline flight and think that our teeth are going to be cleaned. Although I think that would be an awesome idea and I wish they would do it. So trademark then becomes about the class or classes that you're filing in, right? You might be in class 41, which is entertainment and education, or class 35, which is more advertising and providing services for people, or, a specific class for a type of goods. And they get, super into the weeds. Plastic widget for, oil and gas drills. There's a category that will be lumped into. So what I advise people to do when they're thinking about trademarks is, if you're coming up with the name for your product or your company or your service, you should be searching. And you could just straight up do a Google search. Does somebody else use this name? What else is out there? I mean, if you can't get the social media URLs, that's important. You can also search in the trademark office. I will tell you, they actually just changed their computer search engine after 35 years. They literally had the same computer software. You did it on your phone because it wasn't mobile for 35 years. And now they've changed it. Everybody's mad because now we don't remember how to do it anymore. It's a little bit harder than it used to be, but you can search. I also think you can work with a trademark lawyer. Most trademark lawyers will have a flat fee and it's pretty straightforward. And so it's not a big, scary number. But you're looking at, Michelle's magical mushroom elixir is going to be some kind of, food product, and I'm going to file it in that category. But then let's also say I'm going to make an animated TV series about it. And then I would file in that category as well. So there's a process there of kind of thinking about what categories can you file in, where should you be. Trademark is both offensive and defensive, right? Like you want to know before you name your product that Walmart is not also using that name. And I keep using that because I literally had a client who wanted to name something and I did the search and I was like, okay, well, Walmart has about 10 products with this name, so we should just go find another one because you don't want to be in a trademark battle with Walmart, right? They have all the money and you don't. So you're looking at that, like you don't want to use a name where somebody else already has it, and then you're going to have to defend yourself from that. And you also want to be able to protect yourself from other people using yours. So you're kind of looking both ways. Can I clear this name? Is anybody else using something similar? On the trademark side, what is happening is most people, if they have any kind of product, you pretty much have to sell it on Amazon to be in that e-commerce world. And Amazon requires you to have a trademark registration or an application for them to do anything if anybody is counterfeiting your product. So what has happened is that whole influx of millions of producers selling their things on Amazon, all of whom are then required to have a registration, means the US Trademark Office is jammed. It now takes almost 2 years to get through the process.
Wow.
They're overwhelmed with, XYZ widget thing on Amazon. So, if you want immediate results, like I want to make sure I own that name before I put it on a product, it's going to take you 2 years and there's no real fast track, and that's just what it is. Okay, I'll stop for a minute. Do you have other questions?
No, I think providing the timeline was a good kind of way to set the expectation. And I think you clarifying, right, that there's a certain level of research required for a trademark, right, prior to registering it. And then even afterward, I think is useful to know. And so I do have some other questions here. And one of them is, when and how should business owners or entrepreneurs think about intellectual property specific to their business strategies?
Yeah. So really all the time you should be thinking about it. And you should also think about yourself as part of the brand, right? In a way, it's the name, image, and likeness, but if you go and you speak to organizations, if you write anything, if you do anything, you're also thinking like, oh, here I am. What am I creating? And for creative industries, like you can see, I'll put it this way. I can't put that way. This way, the green photographs. I can't get my hand right. Is one of the artists who paints street murals in Austin. A lot of those street artists are also then creating, comic books or art books or whatever. And so they're thinking about, how do I take a character that maybe I developed to spray paint on a wall, but now I'm actually using that character in some kind of graphic novel or some kind of process. And so you're just constantly looking at, where am I creating something that represents an idea fixed in a tangible means of expression, right? If I've figured out, this is my 10-point checklist on how to get this work done, maybe I want to file a copyright registration because it's super handy and people are going to want to steal it and use it for themselves. Think something like that, where it's a compilation, it's your thinking made tangible, right? It's those kinds of materials that often, if you're not in the business of creating intellectual property, it's hard to see that you have it. And so that's part of the work, is looking around and thinking, oh, I have a really good training video that I created for my workers, and I just have it up on YouTube and anybody could take it. Well, maybe I want to copyright register that because that's important information that I've really put together in this particular way. So it's really kind of a discipline and a little bit of a muscle. The other thing I would say is be also looking at what other people are doing, right? So if you're here and there's another company that kind of is who you want to turn into, what have they got as intellectual property, right? If you're a small mom and pop and you make jams, who is like in the path ahead of you? And you're like, I'm going to go look at what they trademarked. I'm going to look at what they do, right? Because there's sort of can give you information about how you should think about what you've created. So as long as you're not stealing their stuff, they're, kind of finding those comparables. Who is like me and what are they doing? And how can that help me see what maybe I should be doing?
Yeah, no. And that's something that, those benchmarking kind of is already a part of a business strategy. You're constantly comparing yourself to the competition. So it's one way to think about it then, right, in our intellectual property strategy, right, is comparing ourselves to, and I think your experience really comes out, right, when you're able to give us examples, right? I think it's something that really our community is able to relate to, which helps provide kind of a little bit more clarification when we're talking about something like intellectual property.
Well, and I think that's right, because often it feels like it's this monolithic big thing over there that you don't know how to approach. And as we all know, the big things are scary. And so it's like, how do you make small steps out of it? So one little task you could do for yourself is be like, I'm just going to Google what my benchmarking comps are. What are they doing? I'm just going to follow them. I'm just going to see how they think about themselves and what they do. And that's a really easy step.
Yeah.
But it gets you in the vein of sort of training yourself to think about intellectual property.
No, and I want to give you the space right now. I know we've talked about a lot, but is there a particular key point that you would like our listeners or our community to take away from this conversation?
Yeah. So one of the main things that I talk to people about is that the law and the legal structures are really a tool of those in power, right? So the reason you get some really long document and it's in Times New Roman font is that they're telling you, you can't comment on this. Nope, all locked down. And, it's like some internet thing that you have to click on that you don't get to negotiate. I think a landlord contract is a great example. You're just kind of a residential tenant. You don't get to negotiate that lease. You just have to take what they give you. But if you're a commercial tenant, you can maybe ask for some stuff or push back on some stuff. And so one of the things that I want people to recognize is that, it's not your job to be the lawyer, but also you shouldn't be afraid of kind of pushing into that space, right? Someone sends you a document, here's a consulting agreement or a vendor agreement, is really kind of understanding what's in the document you're signing, because where people really kind of make irrevocable mistakes is when you sign an agreement and you don't know what you signed. Hey, I thought that was a license. No, they just bought your property and took it from you. Or, Taylor Swift's management agreement, right? Like you sign your life away and somebody owns all your albums, right? Like, you need to read the fine print. And so I always encourage people that the worst thing you can do is nothing. Then, the next step is, just be a Google detective, like just Google stuff, see what you find out. Don't listen to the AI summary, go deep into the weeds. And then maybe after you've educated yourself a little bit, so you kind of know your area, is talk to a lawyer. There's resources through EGBI. If you're in the art space, there's an organization called Texas Accountants and Lawyers for the Arts that do pro bono work. But also you can come to somebody and say, I have this sort of questions around these sort of issues. And it's not really going to cost you a bunch of money. Because where the big money comes in is when you're in lawsuits, right? The planning, strategy, consultation piece usually is managed by your budget. So if you went to a lawyer and you said, hey, I only have this much money and I just want to tackle this subject, then you just sort of live in that box. So really one of the things is kind of developing that internal muscle of, okay, I'm going to understand what's in this agreement, because I guarantee you it's designed to make you not, right? That is a feature, not a bug. They want you not to ask any questions. And especially when I'm working with creative people and, you're an author and you get an agreement from a publisher, my clients will say, I can't tell you how many times they'll say, are we allowed to negotiate? Right? Because the world is telling you you're not allowed to negotiate. Just take this and be quiet. And I'm like, no, of course we're always going to negotiate. And even if we can't, of course we can't get all the things, you're going to be clear that you asked for that and they said no. So now you can't delude yourself into thinking, hey, but maybe they'll be nice to me and they'll give it to me. And the answer is no. Do you still want to do this deal? Right? Like to be very clear about what's in the agreement. So that's one broad note. And the other, which I would just say kind of, instead of just receiving a contract from somebody, is as you're doing business and you're bringing on people, you're working with other people, you should have a contract. And even if the contract is just written bullet points, Michelle's going to do phone calls 3 days a week for 20 hours and then deliver a report on Wednesday for $12. Like just put things in writing, because people often feel sort of anxious, like maybe a contract is some magical, scary thing. The contract is offer, acceptance, consideration. Who's going to do what, when, for how much money, what happens if I get hit by a bus, right? And so I really just encourage people to have those conversations, talk about them, put things in writing, regardless of the intellectual property part of it. But just put your stuff in writing, because then you could say, hey, I said yellow by Wednesday. And you're like, no, green by Thursday. And if we didn't have it in writing, we would not understand that. So those are sort of the two main things: is push past the fear and really understand that clarity is kindness, and writing things down gets you to clarity.
Yeah, no, that's a perfect summary of even the discussion we were having prior to starting, right? I love that you gave the example of your son looking over his lease. I think that was a clear example of how this information can empower us and how we become better advocates for ourselves, even if we don't have to learn how to navigate the whole system, but just becoming informed, right? Gives us so much more room.
Yeah, I was telling these guys before the podcast that my maternal triumph was when my son was going to University of New Mexico. I made him go through every page of the lease agreement when he was having to sign it in DocuSign, like I do with my clients, where I just said, okay, here's the indemnification provision. This means this. Here's the, termite provision, blah, blah, blah. Just high level. Here's what they're saying. And then like a month or two later, he had to send a note to his landlord because the screens were missing from the window, and he could point to the section in the lease agreement. And I was filled with maternal joy that he knew that there was something in there because he had read it the first time. Right. And so he was able to use the contract for himself and say, hey, under section XYZ, you have to have screens on the window. Please make that happen. Right. And so even though, contracts and the law often feel like they're structured for people in power, part of the power you get to take back is you understand what's in that agreement. Yeah.
There you go. No, thank you. Thank you for this information that you're providing to our community. How can we find out more information about Martell Media House and also about the services that y'all offer?
Sure. Yeah, I think martellmediahouse.com, Martell with 2 L's. And then there's a little button you can click on to sign up for a short free consultation. So basically someone will call me and say, I have this question, and we talk a little bit about it. And then, really it's a question of me making sure that I have the right experience to help somebody. Like if they needed a patent lawyer, I would be like, here's some patent lawyer names. And then also for people to feel comfortable with me. So we have time to have that initial conversation. But really, as I kind of said at the beginning, one of the fun things for me is getting to take back some of that power, right? There's a lot of power in the law and the contract, and most of the time the structures, the crusty structures, retain that power for themselves. And so even if, for example, you have a contract from the city and there's not a lot you can negotiate, maybe sometimes what we're trying to do is just kind of make the off the rack suit fit you. Right? Here's the off the rack suit from the city, but we need to make sure, hey, you don't need this cybersecurity insurance requirement because you're not doing that. So take that out. And, we just try to clean it up just so that it fits the facts of what's happening. And that's very doable, right? Because you can say, you can't get them to change their indemnification provision, but you can be like, hey, I don't need that because that doesn't apply. And then they'll take stuff out.
Perfect. No, thank you so much for just taking the time and explaining something that is scary that for a lot of folks. But this is why we have folks in the community kind of supporting. Like you don't have to do it all alone. So Michele can be a great resource. We're a great resource. We're connectors, right? So even if we don't have the expertise or experience, we know people in the community that do. Exactly. And so thanks again for taking the time, Michele. Well, friends, that's all for today. And so thanks again. I hope you find this episode useful for you. If you know someone who could benefit from listening, please share the link with them. And remember that La Incubadora podcast is part of the Economic Growth Business Incubator, a business incubator in Central Texas that offers training, coaching, and support to small business owners with barriers to achieving success. So if you'd like to learn more information about EGBI, please visit egbi.org and see you soon. Thank you, Michele. Thank you, Martell Media House, for being a part of this episode and for making this possible.
Gracias.